Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Resilient and Rowdy. This is your host, Jess, and today my special guest is Kian. Hey girl.
Hey girl.
So, backstory, real quick for my audience. I am really big on mental health and wellness, and I love following people who are like minded. And I stumbled across Kian not too long ago, but she's super beautiful and she has this military background and she's talking openly about mental health. And I just really appreciate that. Throughout the time that I've been following her, I feel like she has some really important some takes and some personal views on mental health. And I would just love to just get to know her and understand why and have that discussion so that we can all learn. But yeah, Kian, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody. So, I am an Air Force veteran. I did 6 years active duty, got out in 2018, transitioned into the contractor force. Ironically enough, not dealing with mental health, but dealing with flight simulators. And I'm a mom to two incredible tiny human beings, and they are my world. And I do my thing on the military side, and I really try my best to do my thing with mental health and just promote a positive message, but more specifically with men's mental health, because that is my passion.
I really love that because I feel like it comes from a good place, and especially being a mother of two boys, like
Right,
you talk the talk, but you walk the walk. Like you're instilling these
right,
beliefs and things into your boys to guide them better into the world. Whereas a lot of parents out there are just doing their best, and I absolutely applaud that.
right.
But I think with especially our background in the military, we see there is a little bit of a couple stigmas out there
Yep,
hindering the potential of the men that surround us who are brave, who are intelligent, who are doing amazing things. And we all have our struggles, but I do want to add an emphasis on men's mental health because sometimes it's not approached in the best way. We can
no,
sit here and bash on each other all we want. At the end of the day,
yep.
we're all humans. We all have feelings.
Mhm.
And I've noticed that it's really difficult to take a step back, and
Right,
especially from that military sense. So there's these identities that kind of build them up and make them
right,
great men, but also we all have our flaws. And I think there's always things that we can work on. I like to joke and say people have poked and prodded at women saying that we're crazy and we're this
right.
and we're that. And we're over here working on ourselves and getting
Mhm.
better and going to therapy
Right,
and trying to understand both sides. But I think men's mental health is really important because those are the people that we love.
yeah,
They're the people that surround us in your career or in your life, or if you're a parent and you just want what's best for them. And I know personally, it really breaks my heart to see someone who is struggling and really needs
yeah,
that help, but there's society and stigmas and stereotypes that are keeping them from getting help. So I love that you put out these messages and you tell people to check on their friends because that's important.
right.
So I want to dive into your why and why men's mental health is so important to you. You are consistently putting yourself out there and making yourself approachable to people so that they can also talk to you, message you if they want to. I really admire all those things about you and really want to dive into that.
This is the first time I'm even telling my why behind men's mental health in general. And I figured this was like the perfect place to really share this story. So, a lot of people don't know my father was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder and anxiety and depression when I was small. A lot of that stemmed from after he got a very serious kidney diagnosis and that survivability and losing, I don't want to say losing his masculinity, but having to depend on others to save his life. That's a major hit to a man, right? And as the years progressed on, I was always my dad's buddy. I still am. Like, he's my rock, I'm his rock. As the years progressed and I would see him go to therapy, he would come home with bottles of pills. Now, I'm not talking anything light. I'm talking like 12 to 16 pill bottles for anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder. And I just remember being very young and seeing him take these and him just his mood changing. And I was like, something doesn't seem right. And as the years went on, I just said, how do they treat him like this? How do they fail someone I love so dearly like this? As I got older, it was this, being his advocate when he couldn't have a voice for himself because they wouldn't listen. And I would hear my mom's friends share their stories, and I said, something isn't right here. This is very off balance between, and I'm not saying women's mental health doesn't matter. It matters. It really does. But there's such a complete weight balance between the two. And I was like, something's not right. So I would go to his therapy appointments with him and I would see the lack of care. I would see the, oh, okay, how are you doing? All right, here's this. Go about your day. So it was being that advocate for him. And it was getting older. And I would call his psychiatrist and I would scream, do your job. You are failing him. Do your job. And it went down from so many pill bottles to finding the right therapist for him, finding the right psychiatrist for him, and saying, hey, dad, how did you feel after this appointment? What were the good things? What were the not so good things? How did you two get along during your session in your eyes? And I would be there most of the time, but to just hear it through his voice. And it was that constant battle of just yelling at doctors, yelling and just saying, fix this, do your job, until finally, after years, him only having to take 2 pills to regulate his bipolar disorder, his anxiety, and his depression. And that was my why. I was like, I don't ever want anybody else to feel this way. I don't want other men to feel the pain that my father had to feel for so many years because nobody heard his voice. Nobody was showing that care. And I said, I will never let this happen to somebody else if I can control it. So that was my why, to be that advocate, to be that pit bull for men's mental health, to say, it's okay. It's okay to talk. It's okay to communicate. It's okay if you don't feel okay because you deserve to feel okay. So that was my, yeah, that was my,
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. But just wow, I'm so proud of you. That couldn't have been an easy thing to do, to especially as a young woman, but somebody needed to do that. And I
right.
think there's also some important generational things to note there. If we have our own struggles today
Right.
in 2024,
Yeah.
the whole mental health campaign has progressed a lot in the past
Yeah.
10 or so 20 years maybe. But
Right.
also we have to think about the generation that our parents grew up in, our
100%.
uncles, aunts, whomever, or even our cousins who are a little older than us. And back in the day, you didn't really talk about things. You said
No.
it's like very shallow. It's, oh, hey, how are
Yeah.
you doing? I'm good. How are you? And they even teach you, and you're socialized to act that way, even in a doctor's office, where honestly,
Yeah.
you should feel safe and vulnerable enough to discuss that. But it's also a
Right.
two-way street. It's also doctors who might be a little overworked. They have way too many patients
Yep.
and they lose that connection with their patients because that's
Right.
a human being sitting right across
Yeah.
from you. How can you be so cold and dismissive and not really pry because it's
Right.
their life in your hands? But I'm so sorry to hear that happening with your father. Here's a gentleman who's trying to get help, who's trying to do it right, but then you're just throwing some pills and send on your merry
Yes.
way, and that can do more damage than good. That's
Right.
not saying that medication is bad, but
Right.
when you have somebody that's just trying to send someone on their way and not really look into them, like, hey, this is a gentleman that has this and that condition. These medications might not do well with him, or baby steps. Like, I'm not a doctor, but even I know that you're not supposed to be taking like a cocktail of things because if
No.
something goes wrong, you don't know what caused it. They might be like, oh, you're fine.
Exactly.
I'll see you in 6 months. And within 6 months,
Right.
a lot of damage can happen. It's important to do both, but understanding your father's position, you just don't do those things. A doctor is
No.
a person of respect, and you're supposed to be as little of an inconvenience as possible. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're the patient, you're going to the doctor to get help. You
Right.
deserve that time of day. You deserve to be advocated for. You deserve
Hmm.
to be heard. So I
Right.
really appreciate you just being that voice
Hmm.
because it's just an important thing to say. And I think it's also important to be reminded by the people in your community or even a stranger that you
Right.
matter. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
you say that you don't really have a mental health background. Have you gone to therapy yourself?
Yeah. So actually, I did go to therapy for a while when I was in the military. And I had just this incredible human being. He was a captain. And it was just, he showed me his vulnerability. And I was like, that's really powerful for a man to step up and also show me his vulnerability and what he experienced. I think the most important thing I learned from those sessions was I feel like a lot of women think they can't advocate for men's mental health because they're women, but that's not the case. It's you showing your effort to the other gender to say, hey, I may not biologically be a man. I may not think exactly how you think, but I've done the work and I've put in the work to try and understand from your perspective, to try and bridge that gap with you so we can work together for this. And during my time in therapy, it was, it changed my life. It really did. He was just this incredible human being. And it really set that fire in me even more to say, men's mental health matters so much. And there is nothing I won't do to promote that message. I will stop at nothing to try and change this horrendous stigma attached to it, to try and say, hey, it is okay. So, what can we do together, Jeds?
And I think it's really important that you're using those experiences and even with your own sessions, just like things that you can implement and help other people in your life. And I like that you made that emphasis on, hey, yeah, I'm a woman and you're a man, but we're not so different after
Right.
all. For me
Yeah.
personally, I always go back to childhood. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
all different, and that's an obvious, but we're all human and we all had an upbringing. And I feel like as children, that's where I could connect best because it didn't matter if you were a boy or if you were a girl. If you scraped your knee at recess, you're going to be a little upset about it. You might cry. It's going to
Right.
hurt. And I think that's a really good example of how, like, people, it's not just men, but people can
Mhm.
disconnect from their own emotions because they don't want to be perceived as weak. You show me anyone that can ride a bike, scrape their knee, eat concrete, and not feel something.
Right.
That's a robot.
Yeah.
Or okay, maybe you do have really good control of your emotions, but not allowing your body to feel what it feels. You feel that blood pulsing on your knee. You know,
Yeah.
you feel the heaviness, like you might cry a little bit, or you just feel a little distraught. You might be scared. So these
Yep.
are all human emotions. And that's what I try to tell my friends is, when you were born, when you were a baby, when your mom gave birth to you, like you cried, you are
Yep.
capable. And that just shows that you're alive. When like taking things back is showing up for your friend when they're upset. And that's what you talk about with check on your friends. So
Right.
it's not just checking on your friends and saying, hey, dude, you okay? And
Exactly.
it's a little more than that. And maybe they have to say, hey, honestly, I'm having a bad day. And you should meet them with, hey, do you want to talk about it? Or
Right.
is there something that I can do to help? Or maybe you don't want to talk about it. Do you want to just hang out for a bit and get your mind off of things? So it's
Right.
knowing how to show up. But I feel like more commonly, I do see a lot of guys that are a little dismissive of their friends. And so
Yes.
their friends don't feel comfortable. So how about you give your friend the time of day because that might be what they're more comfortable with. They're not ready to
Right.
go to therapy yet. They might not
Yep.
afford it. So I love that it's more than just a phrase. It's more than just
Right.
a little thing that you can put on your t-shirt. I got your six. No, you
Yeah.
mean it. But I definitely want you to like dive into that.
It's super important. I feel like, especially with among the community nowadays, people put it on a t-shirt, like you said, or people put it in their profile, or people do whatever. Check on your homies. Don't put that if you're not going to do it. Because at the end of the day, these are people's lives. If they message you, you may not be able to respond right away, but say, hey, man, listen, I want to listen to you. Give me a little bit of time. I'll get back to you and we can for sure talk about it later. But I just feel like people are ignoring and doing this and doing that. And I'm like, dude, people need you. We need to be a community. So when someone messages you, say, hey, man, whatever you want to talk about, I'm here to listen. And if you'll allow me, I would like to take that journey with you to help you get to where you need to be to reach a more mentally positive space
Yeah.
and just be consistent. There's so much inconsistency out there. And it's really heartbreaking because that tells someone, do I not have value? Is my value decreasing? And it hits harder to most people than others realize. So
Yeah.
be that consistent force. Say, hey, dude, we're in this together. You're not alone. I promise you, no matter what you come to me with, we're going to figure it out. And if we can't figure it out right now, we're just going to keep working towards it until we do, whether that's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, I'm here. So let's do it together.
Yeah. And that's a real homie right there. That conversation and listening to your friend. And sometimes they just want to vent and sometimes they want advice. I will always
Yep.
say that. You need to understand where they're coming from or even just ask them. They're like, hey, dude, like that's a lot. Do you want me to
Yeah.
just listen to you or do you want me to give you some advice? I might not have some, but I could look into it or ask somebody and we can get you like some good
Right.
guidance. So knowing how to show up for your friend is really important if you are going to do that. But
Yeah.
if you're going to say it with your chest,
Yeah. Mean
and
it.
buy it because also that conversation could keep them from doing some self-destructive,
Yes.
reckless behaviors. It doesn't matter if you're in a military background or just civilian background, we're all the same. And sometimes you
Right.
don't want to face those emotions or that difficult situation. And it's easy to
Mhm.
drink or
Yeah.
smoke or whatever and escape. Or some people even go to the gym, which I applaud that. You're doing good, but you're also not really taking care of what's up here. And
Yes.
sometimes keeping your body moving does help you think a little better and help you
Right.
process some things. But sometimes it is good to just check with somebody so you do feel like, hey, was I valid feeling this way or did I
Yeah.
overreact? And sometimes, we all can lack a little bit of self awareness. We can
Right.
all have our own little bias. We can all be a little stubborn. And so that's
Yep.
why it's really good to have those conversations. Even if you do feel confident about it or you feel okay about it, it
Mhm.
is good to bounce that off of someone and just see, could I have handled this situation better? Or what was something better that I could have done instead of this, vice versa, etc.
Mhm.
So those discussions really build that bond and that you can go to your friend. Because I feel like everyone wants to say, or check on your homies, check on your friends. I got your six. But then they're very dismissive of their friends when they are having a difficult time. I could sit here and preach about all the little clapbacks that they say. That doesn't help anybody.
No.
And especially if you have a military background or you've known a lot of losses, I don't like going to funerals. I feel like men's mental health isn't always taken so seriously until it's too late. I had a guest a couple weeks ago talk about how we jump to the point before they start having these ideations or these ideas or
Mhm.
start self destructing. So it's just
Yeah.
as simple as reaching out. Would you say that you also implement these things into your parenting? Like you mentioned, you have two boys. Is this like, are these kind of like discussions that you can have with your sons, acknowledging their feelings and helping them process that it's okay to cry and things like that?
Oh, dude, 100%. Like, part of the reason I went to school for psychology is not only for my dad, but for my kids too, because I knew I was raising boys. And I said, how do I give these two little humans a good foundation to where they grow up and they are men that are self aware, that are not afraid to communicate, and that are not afraid to be truthful to themselves when an emotion that they are not comfortable with arises
Yeah.
and communicate that to me. So I have that conversation all the time with my kids. I say, listen, it's okay to cry. If you have anything that you feel inside that you want to get out, come talk to mommy. That's why I'm here. And I've always been very honest with them. And they are so intelligent and so like, they have this insane ability to communicate and they're so far beyond their years that blows my mind. And I'm just like, they come to me and they say, hey, mom, like, this is what happened at school. Or, well, this made me feel this way at school today. So this is what I did. Or what should we do? And it's just opening those lines of communication. And through my parenting style with them, I hope they transfer that to their friends as well who may not get that at home.
Yeah.
So that way we have such a responsibility to raise the next generation in a way where it's one team and it's not every man out for themselves and it's not a bunch of sharks. It's a bunch of grown men that are like, I got you, dude. And if I say that, that.
That's beautiful. And I think that's really important. Like, you don't have to raise your kids the same way that you were raised, or you can tweak it here and there. Maybe you were raised really well,
Yep.
but there's always room for improvement. And I really appreciate and admire that about you. Like parenting is like no joke, but let alone two little boys in a world that teaches them or shows them
Right.
that just all these horrible stigmas that keep them from being their true full potential because
Right.
I think there's nothing more masculine and strong than a man that can really feel and process all of those
Yes.
emotions. That's we're human beings. That's what we're
Right.
created and built to do. And when you dismiss a certain emotion, it does hold you back, the way that you perceive the world or how you communicate
Yes.
with others. Having that emotional intelligence instilled in you, especially at a young age, is wonderful. Maybe you didn't have that growing up, but it's not too late to change. We
Right.
have time. You are capable. You are strong. And
Yes.
I understand that there are so many stuck points that anyone, men and women, can get on. And so that's why this message is just so important, that there's somebody out there that can't go to therapy or they shouldn't,
Mhm.
or there's a way to process it and it's the way that they saw their dad
Right.
process things growing up, and that might not be the best way. We don't have these discussions to bash anyone. A lot of people are
Yes.
hurting, and when you see yourself doing well, I really take note of the people that look behind them and check on the people who are maybe struggling, maybe stuck. And that's
Right.
how you and I feel about men and mental health. It's
Mhm.
okay. We had these upbringings, we had these difficulties, we got help, and thankfully we've had some really good experiences. And we want to show people that, hey, going to the therapist, it is a little scary, but when you
Right.
start doing it after a while, you feel so like empowered and confident, and
Right.
like you carry yourself a little better. Like you
Yeah.
don't have all of this trauma and like messy
Right.
emotions and stuff just like weighing down on your chest. You can roll your shoulders back and approach things better. And we just want
Right.
that for men. You doing that on social media, doing that for your dad, doing that for your boys, like it's refreshing, it's appreciated. How can people help you with that? Can people follow you on Instagram? Can people recommend your page to others?
Mhm. So fortunately, a lot of pages have been like, "Hey, dude, I have this person who I don't really know what to say to them, who came to me with something about their mental health, and they give them my page, and they're like, hey, message her because I promise you, she's gonna do good by you. Like, you guys are gonna have a good conversation." And it's just that if people choose to follow me on Instagram to read what I have to say, and maybe they adapt that to their own life, that is awesome. I've been super fortunate to get messages like that, and dude, that just it means the world to me because I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow, look at you, look at how I'm proud of you, and I hope you're proud of you." Because that takes a lot to say, "Hey, I have this problem, but I read this, so how do I bridge that gap and integrate that into my own life?" And I think too, it's just the biggest step you can take is admitting it to yourself when there's something going on and it's not comfortable. I had a professor once tell me, "What's the biggest distance in the universe?" And I said, "I don't know. What kind of question is that?" And he goes, "It's between the head and the heart." And I said, "That I will never forget that because it is true. That mind body connection is so important. And you have to be uncomfortable with yourself to grow." And I like to tie that into men's mental health too, because a lot of people say it's not masculine to go to therapy. It is masculine. It is masculine to want more for yourself because you have to put in the bravery of being honest with yourself. That's not easy to do, no matter who you are. So it's just that self admittance, and it's bringing others together, not in a drinking environment, not in a party environment, and say, "Hey, let's network," and say, "I would like to share my story as a man or a woman if you would like to," and say, "This is my struggle that I had to go through to get where I am today." And people think that mental health, in some regard, is a sprint. And I'm like, it is never a sprint, it is a marathon. And quite frankly, it's a journey that some will have to work on for their entire life. Like me, I struggle with anxiety all the time, like anxiety, panic disorder, and it is just a constant mental battle. But it's like whenever you have that for yourself and you go through it and you see your loved ones go through it, you don't want anybody to feel that way. And if they do feel that way, you want to be that comfort for that person to say, "You know what? If I'm wearing a life jacket and I know I have an extra one, I'm not going to keep it while I watch you drown. I'm going to give it to you and say, hey, let's do this together. Let's learn how to swim again until we're strong enough, and then just keep it going from there."
Yeah. Yeah. Why wouldn't you share those tools or like the life jacket, like you're saying? And it's important to note that what works for some people might not work for everyone, but you're worth that effort. When some of my really low and difficult points of my own mental health struggles, I keep thinking like, oh, what's the point? It's not going to
Mhm.
change. There's situational things, there's life things, there's things that were in the past. And I just I didn't find any joy or even have the energy to work on myself. But lately, I've been really investing in myself and
Mhm.
rewording this inner dialogue that holds me back. That was like what you were just talking about, the head and the heart. I had to realize that I'm my biggest enemy. I've had a lot of
Yes.
difficulties, but I've allowed those struggles and those things that have occurred in my life to dictate the tone of my inner dialogue. And so I think some men can relate to that. I think actually a lot of people can. You talk very
Right.
negatively and you say, "Oh, I'm a realist." But really
Yeah.
you're a negative Nancy and you need to love yourself a little more. Give yourself a
Right.
little grace where it's applicable, but also know that when you redirect that inner dialogue into a more positive, a more hopeful
Mm.
tone, it really can slowly change things. And it's all the
Right.
little things that you do that accumulate that do help you feel better. It doesn't take the past away. Decisions were made,
Mhm.
but moving forward, you can genuinely make really good change if you work on those things. I like how you made the emphasis on it's a marathon, not a sprint. But
Mhm.
I hope that for people listening, you are worth it. You are
Oh,
worth that
100%.
time. You are worth that
Yeah.
effort. It's going to be hard, but when you move so far along, you start to feel a little better and
Yeah.
life starts feeling like, okay, I can do this, or I have the tools now to get through anything
Mhm.
that comes my way. And I know that I've got some solid people rooting for me and that I can
Right.
go to for help. And that's just all we want for everyone. It's going to be work. It's not
Yeah.
going to be easy, but
Nope.
you're not alone in those things. I know a lot of people that go to therapy that don't talk about it out loud. It's just important to have that self awareness. And sometimes when you're lacking
Mhm.
self-awareness, it can be hurtful when you have a friend that comes
Right.
to you and they come from a genuine place. So,
Right.
how would you say would be best for people to handle that situation when you do have a friend that's concerned for you and you're hurt and it's easy to lash out. You're like, "Oh man, I don't know what you're talking about," but this is somebody that cares about you.
So, I think the best way, I tell people write a letter because men often think with their logical brain, right? And emotions are obviously included in that. But you don't want to overwhelm someone, so I say write a letter about how you feel. Ask them, "Hey, when you get time, can you just read this alone when you get a chance?" Lay everything out. Say, "Hey, I've noticed this in you." And then that way, the receiving end of that, they can take time to process it. They don't feel like they're being attacked. They don't feel overwhelmed because when you're hearing like 10 different things at once, your mind is just cranking. You can't process it. With a letter, you can categorize everything that's being said and say, "Okay, let me go back to the first part of their letter to me. Now let me go to the second part. Now, how do I wrap this together to make to really grasp the full point of what they're trying to say?" And even write a letter in return to the friend that's noticed those differences in you. So that way they don't feel like you don't want to hear them, but say, "Hey, this is everything I'm feeling through my eyes, and I acknowledge what you wrote." And so that way, with that letter, you just come to that understanding together, and it's just a completely level playing field. And it's alone, and it gives you time to process, and then you can go forward.
Yeah. I like that because it does give you an opportunity to like really process it and not
Mhm.
just immediately respond. That does no good on either end. You want to be able to approach your friend in a civil, calm way. No name calling. You can describe their behavior, but I found that to be like a very difficult thing to go through. But that's how you know that you care about your friend the most is you're
Right.
noticing some things. And I think you should appreciate that, but it has to be very mature and civil on both sides.
Yes.
I think the letter is also really good because, like you said, it allows them that time to process, to
Right.
respond, but even to reflect. I think that's huge.
Mhm.
Reflection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people might not feel comfortable doing in general. So that's why therapy can
Right.
be so hard for folks is they're already lacking that reflection. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
We can all take a step back and do that with ourselves and I think that's where a lot of self-growth comes in. You want to approach that very gently. So I really like that approach. That's really nice cuz it's so hard to try to talk to someone and you're
Right.
trying to come off calm, cool, collected, and
Mhm.
just have a mature conversation, but especially when
Right.
it's in person or over text.
Yeah, over text. And
It's a
two, I think like with a letter, it just shows the person on the other end. Wow, like my friend took the time to sit down out of their day and write all these things, just show their care for me and to say, hey, I just wanted to bring it up to you and I wanted to take the time to show you I really do care.
Yeah. I think also just handwritten letters, period, are just,
Right,
and you can see their handwriting, and handwriting is so
right.
individual. It's beautiful in and of itself. So
Yeah.
it's okay. They said some things that are hard to process. They might
Mhm.
be a little hurtful, but they meant
Right.
hopefully be nice, y'all.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's again where we learn, where we grow. Like we get older and sometimes we don't really grow or mature or evolve. And I think
Right.
that's also important to say. Like I mentioned earlier, okay, maybe your parents growing up taught you this way and clearly it's not
Right.
working. So it's okay to break down those beliefs and feel what's right for you, but that just shows that your friend cares. Sometimes but moving forward, I know that your boys are getting older. I know that you've gone through a lot of things with your dad lately, but this new year, is there anything that you're working on or just hoping to accomplish, especially with your mental health discussions online and in real life too?
I just want to keep trucking to try and get the message out there, not only in a social media sense, but even in like the car community, because I do love drag racing and I do love cars. And I was trying to figure out ways in this new year to integrate like mental health with that as well.
Mhm.
So that way the car community is so tight knit. And I'm like, okay, there's already a strong network. So how do I integrate like the mental health portion in that? So that way the network gets even bigger and you're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
man," it expands it even more and you're like talking about your cars and, "Hey, man, can we talk about this too?" And you can talk about that while you're also doing something that you love.
Mhm.
And so that way it just gives you such a healthy environment to reflect even more and say, "Hey, like I talked to so and so about this, like you should hit them up too. It was actually like a really cool thing and I learned a lot." So
Yeah.
just try and get it out there in so many different fields, even like in the capacity I am too, working with military still, my uniform dudes know they can come to me anytime. I'm like, okay, bro, what are you here for? Are you here for therapy or are you here for sim stuff? And
Yeah.
they pick, and we sit down and we talk and just do more of that to tell people, like, just talk about it. Open up the lines of communication, even though it's hard and it's uncomfortable. Push through it and just say, gosh, I know this is going to be so to talk about, but just do it anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're doing that for your community. I do see that sometimes certain gatherings and groups can, almost thrive off of chaos and drama and messiness. So it's really
Yes.
refreshing to try to bring a new light to things because you can relate on your passion with
Yeah.
cars and drag racing and whatever's going on with your car parts or what have you. But you can also connect on a human level. Hey,
Exactly.
I didn't see you at the meet last week. Is everything okay? Just checking in
Right.
on you, just having that more personal, because I think that's a great example for anyone listening. It's you can bring this perspective into
Mhm.
whatever sector or area that you're in. I do hear a lot of men, whether they're surrounded by like-minded folks or they're in the military wearing the same uniform or the same
Mhm.
profession, or even in their own guy group, they don't really feel heard or seen. They're just there. Y'all haven't opened up to each other. So what's stopping
Right.
it? And that's
Yep.
that inner dialogue I was talking about. So there's certain stigmas and stereotypes and harmful sayings out there that keep men from, confiding in each other, from getting help. So
Right.
if you can't find that with your homies, there's definitely people online.
So,
Yeah, but sometimes it is good to get offline, off the phone.
yeah.
While there are awesome communities online, I do want to
Mhm.
emphasize that getting outside is important. Definitely try to
Right.
go out and meet people, especially like you mentioned that you struggled with anxiety, and I definitely have my fights with that as well. And I felt like I just was cooped up all this time. So if it's scary, it's good to push through that because time is the one thing that you don't get back. So
Yes.
I took a couple
100%.
years to really heal and lay low. And now I'm like putting myself out there and okay, I get scared and anxious to go to the gym, but
Yeah.
I need to work out. Baby steps to anything, like baby steps on having certain conversations with friends. So maybe
Mhm.
also reading the room is important as well.
Yeah.
Because maybe you don't want to talk about these things like in the middle of a party, like how you said before. I guess moving forward, what else would you want men to know, especially from a woman's perspective of like how much we care and we mean it from a good way, in a good sense?
I think it's just we wanna reassure you guys that you matter so much to us. We would not be us without you. The world would not be what it is without you. You're needed and you're appreciated, and everything about you is so loved, whether you're in a difficult spot or not. We just wanna support you through it because you deserve to thrive. And we see so many of our male friends, like, up here, right? And we know whenever they go to these low places and you're like, you see their potential and you don't want that to lose that in themselves. You don't want them to just go down in this dark rabbit hole and not be able to come out of it. So it's just that reminder of, you know what, dude, if you go down that rabbit hole, my ass is going to be right down there with you with a flashlight
Yeah.
and we're going to dig you out of this. So
Yeah.
just that reminder of your masculinity is so needed, but don't put that masculinity in a box. Don't put that
Mhm.
in a societal standard of, I can't go get help because I need to be this or I need to be that. No, your masculinity is you being the best you that
Yeah.
you deserve to be. And through nobody else's standard of you, throw that out the door.
Yeah.
Your best you, because it matters so much.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I think I saw like a meme or like a quote or something like that. And it said something along the lines of people that say, I don't need therapy might be the ones that need it the most or might be
Right.
hurting and affecting their loved ones or people in their life. And so it's really good that you can meet people down there. And I think it's really good to lead them to the resources and everything. But I
Right.
think it's also important to emphasize that sometimes when people go down a really difficult road and we can all try to get you out of there, but I think ultimately it's
Right.
also a choice. And I
100%.
think that's what's difficult about these conversations is there's the occasional person that gets stuck. What's that scene in The Neverending Story where it's Atreyu, like, in the swamp, and he's like,
Uh
"Pull him out of the swamp." Sorry to bring up such a, like, a
huh.
traumatizing movie scene. I've really tried to help a lot of people, and it's almost like they don't want it for themselves. So what can we do with, something like that?
So I think people get stuck in this hole because they say, I'm too far gone. There's no hope. I just want to be so self destructive. But there's a quote that sat with me for a very long time, and it says, show me a sane man and I will cure him for you. Meaning, we have to live in that darkness for a little bit in order to pull ourselves out of it.
Yeah,
There reaches a point where, in your self destructiveness, you come to a wall, and that wall is maybe this acknowledgement of this insanity will lead me to who I need to be to use this for a more positive light in myself. And it's just digging them like themselves out of it. And I think sanity in itself is such a relative term and it's such a society thing.
yeah,
But that's why I tell people, show me a sane man and I will cure him for you. Sanity doesn't exist. It's so relative to everyone. So acknowledge that darkness. Ask yourself what your darkness means to you and use it as your own light eventually. Thrive in it.
that's a really great way to put it, and that's what I've experienced myself.
Mhm.
But I could never really put it into words. It's more of I think I just got fed up with how I felt. And sometimes you just have to be patient with the people that you care
Yes.
about, people that you love. But I also understand that sometimes people might need a distance.
Yes.
You can lead a horse to water, you can't force them to drink, but you're still
Right.
rooting for them. But sometimes your behavior can affect others in certain
Right.
ways. And you got to do it for yourself, but also do it because you don't want to lose these important people in your life. You have friends, and
Right.
there's resources online about anything. And we have this powerful tool in our fingertips, and sometimes I think we don't take advantage of it. Do it for you, and then you can also help other people who might feel similarly.
I like to ask people too, along with that, find your life saving mechanism.
Mhm.
I can't find it for you. So when you're down in your darkness and you're living in it and you're like, "Oh, man, do I want to stay in it? What do I want to do? I'm hurting the people around me." What's your life saving mechanism?
Wow.
And once you find that, then you're able to pull yourself out of it a little bit, there's a really good book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Oh, yeah.
and I love that book, and there's a part in the book where it was this little boy who had witnessed a serious tragedy, right? And he goes to therapy, and the therapist noticed he draws it was after 9/11, he draws a trampoline, and
Mhm.
he goes, "This is interesting. What is this?" And he goes, it was his mind's way of saving those people who had unfortunately lost their lives.
Oh,
There was no coming back from that. But this little boy had this power to create his own life-saving mechanism, his mind's own life-saving mechanism.
yeah.
And that's what I tell people. What's your trampoline?
Yeah,
What
that's
is it?
not and in a healthy way, like, we wanna emphasize some healthy habits. You need to learn to balance those habits, so those are really great tools to just use in your day-to-day life, okay? And sometimes it's like you wanna poke fun at those little things, but you'll be surprised at how much of a difference it makes
Right.
going out and making sure you get enough sunlight, enough exercise, eating well if you're
Yes.
able to. And we all have our own privileges and setbacks, but do what you can with what you have. But you'd also be surprised with what you can find, and you won't find those solutions or new habits if you're not having those conversations.
Right.
So be brave enough to be vulnerable, be brave enough to connect your heart with your mind. You learn more about yourself, you also develop
Yeah.
more into yourself, which is really cool. So maybe you don't want to go to therapy, but you got your friends, you can make healthier decisions because we're young having these conversations and we have youth on our side and we have time, but it's never too late to get into it.
Oh, dude, no, there's no mental health does not discriminate, and it does not there is no age limit to where, "Oh, I have to get help by this time," or, "I have to get better by this time." You can be 99 years old, and if you wanna pull yourself out of it and get that help and acknowledge to get that self-love and work through those struggles, you can at 99, 100 years old. There's no limit, there's no, "Oh, I'm too broken beyond repair." You're not too broken beyond repair. And
Yeah.
also, what I like to tell people too is, especially with reading books, write little things in those books.
Mm,
There's so many pages, and it's that bridging the gap between the information that you're reading. How can I relate this to myself? So that way, at the end, as you're like reading this and you're working through this, and you go back to all these pages and these notes, you're like, huh, wow, look what I've implemented, or look at how far I've come and the changes that I've made. And it's that acknowledging, yes, I was at this point in my life when I was reading this or doing this, but this
nice.
is the work I put in to reach where I am now.
If you find something that works, don't be afraid to suggest those things to your friends or anyone that
Right,
asks. It may or may not stick, it might not be their vibe, but,
right,
when you have those tools, when you have something that worked for you and that's what I love about the veteran community, especially it's we're all dealing with similar difficulties, diagnoses, and things, and so we're all just, like, putting in all of these things that we've been trying and
right.
implementing in our lives or and even suggesting that can help other people, and that's what I really love about the community that we're in. On top of the memes,
Oh, the memes.
yeah,
They're so good.
yeah, and also acknowledge that you don't have to do this huge, grand, life-changing thing. It's just little
No.
things one at a time, and they all accumulate. But building better habits, it just becomes second nature, and I think we're all pretty accustomed to that. You're like, it's really ingrained in you.
You know what else I like tell people too? And some people think it's silly, but I found that it works, right? Part of good mental health is, like you said, that internal conversation you have with yourself. And I think we get so lost as we grow older that we lose that childlike wonder and we lose that childlike mindset. So I say, look at a picture of you when you were young. And if you are just down in the trenches and you're not talking to yourself in a positive way, I want you to look at little you. You would never talk to younger you like that, ever. So make that reflection and say, you know what, for every negative thought, I'm going to have a positive thought about myself. And I'm going to say, okay, negative thought over with. I am smart. I am intelligent. I am masculine. I am whatever kind thing that you would like to say to yourself. And look at that little picture while you're doing it. So you can say,
Yeah,
you know what, little you would be damn fucking proud
yeah.
of older you.
Girl, you're gonna make me cry because my therapist suggested that, and the things that really helped me put things into perspective. Wow,
Right.
I'm an adult now, and I'm doing my best, and I'm taking responsibility for things. But geez, it's that inner voice, and
Yes.
it does no good. Sometimes you have to be real with yourself. And for me, I could always use better terminology and not call myself names, self-deprecation.
Yep.
But especially when you put it like that, you wouldn't talk to your younger
Right.
self like that, that 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old,
Yep.
17-year-old self. That's very beautiful because that's where I started to learn to love and forgive my younger self. And that's a part of the
Right.
process too. Like you said earlier, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and don't burn
Right.
yourself out on trying to do too much at once.
Exactly.
So, setting some goals would be good. Maybe
Yep.
some milestones that you want to reach. I'm not sure what else would you recommend.
I would say setting boundaries too,
Ooh, yeah.
because a lot of time people, like you said, there are some people that steal your peace, and maybe they're not at that point in their life where they're at the mental health journey that you are. Taking a step back doesn't mean you're not supportive,
Yeah.
but it just means you're equipping yourself with more tools for yourself. And then when the people around you are ready to come to that point, now you have more tools in your toolbox to help them with as well. And
Oh,
boundaries are extremely important.
yeah, that's huge. I think you can also love someone from afar. You need your space to
Right.
kind of just focus on you. It's not selfish to focus on you. Definitely take into consideration how you carry yourself and conduct yourself and other situational things. Like take everything into consideration. But when you need to take the time to go to therapy, or maybe you might have a weekly lunch sesh with your friend and that's where y'all vent,
Right.
you can do that. And sometimes the word selfish can be used negatively, but sometimes it's not selfish to
Right.
try to take care of yourself. Balance it out and make sure you're not neglecting your responsibilities, your duties, your relationship with your husband, your wife, your kids, but taking that time, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe a little more to do what you need to do so that you can
Yep.
show up better. I think that's also really huge. Like you mentioned, boundaries are hard, especially
They
when
are.
loved ones or their friends, but
Yep.
if you want to start feeling better, if you want to start doing better, just baby steps into that, into boundaries. It's doable. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kian, if there's anything else you want to share.
I just want to say, one, thank you for having me on here. This was like, I'm so honored, seriously, especially just with the information I was able to put out there today and this being like my first real mental health podcast. I appreciate you so much. And two, for anybody watching, listening, I believe in you. So you should believe in you too.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you, Kian. You are so important and I love what you're doing. I appreciate it so much and I want you to keep on doing you. I love your energy. I love the things that you say and that you mean and you stand by it. And for anyone that is listening that doesn't already follow you, where can they find you at?
They can find me on Instagram and it's just my first name, last name, Kian Auerbach.
Okay, and I will link that in the bio. So thank you so much for joining me and thank you so much for really talking me through this important topic. But men, women, we love you.
We
Humans,
do.
we
Yep.
do. Be sure to check her out, y'all.